Alrighty, I think I have your attention now. Such a great turnout this morning. I'm glad you were able to get here without the rain, although I hear that there is a cold weather warning, so I really appreciate all of your being here bright and early with us at Pack Tower. One of the things I think you noticed right away is the view, and I want to point out what a historic spot that you're in. We sent out a link with more information about the building, and I hope you'll take time to read it, because it's not only a great educational spot for the Seattle colleges, but also serves the community in many, many ways and has been doing so for decades. It is chiefly known most recently for being the startup headquarters for Amazon. So some of you in the room may remember that. In fact, I heard someone say that coming up the elevator this morning. So anyway, you might want to share some stories or ask questions about the building. This is a great gathering place for us. Some housekeeping this morning. Out the back of the doors here, you'll go left for the men's restroom and right for the women's restroom. And I hope that you've picked up a printed copy of the agenda. Yes, do I see some nods? Okay, good. As is typical of large gatherings at the colleges, we do a land acknowledgement. We are in the process of talking with our tribal communities to refine that message, but this morning we do want to say a few words to honor the land that we stand on. We are on the traditional homelands of the Great Coast Salish people, the people of the Muckleshoot, Suquamish, Duwamish, and Tulalip nations. They were and are caretakers of this land. And each day, they actively create, shape, and contribute to our thriving community at the Seattle colleges and beyond. It's my honor to offer this acknowledgement and to celebrate our college's expanding connection and partnership with the tribal peoples of Greater Seattle. I hope these relationships are growing in your communities as well. Now I have the privilege of introducing you to someone very, very special to the Seattle colleges and our Seattle Colleges Foundation. Governor Christine Gregoire appointed Steve Hill as a Seattle Colleges trustee in 2013. Sorry, I am reading from some notes. This is not as smooth as a podcast, but anyway, it's like live TV. Used to be when there were teleprompters and scrolling scripts. Steve has served with distinction until 2022 as a trustee, including 2 terms as chair. On retiring, his service was recognized with the rare accolade Trustee Emeritus. But Steve did not get away from our Seattle colleges for long, and we have tapped his talents again, letting him briefly catch his breath and then recruiting him to chair our foundation. Steve's volunteer leadership also has included top roles with the Seattle Foundation, Seattle City Club, Weyerhaeuser Company, the State of Washington, Washington State University Foundation. It's a real pleasure, Steve, to work with you. Glad that you're here this morning with us, and we want to give a warm welcome to Steve Hill, our board chair.
Thank you, Kerry. Hello. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm really pleased to see this great turnout. And Kerry, thank you for that nice introduction. I think my mother, if she still was with us, would be disbelieving and surprised. But anyway, I want to welcome you all to this place. And Kerry's already pointed out the view, but both the Cascades and the Olympics are out here to celebrate today, this glorious day. And I just think we all ought to take a pause and think about how fortunate we are to live in this wonderful state. So it's really wonderful to see this many people here for the first one of these conferences. I think this work is really important. I have this, I was fortunate that we benefit from public education, and I have a deep regard for the value the community colleges play in our society and particularly in the state. That's why I spent 10 years as a trustee, and that's why after my arm was twisted, I agreed to be the chair of the board of this foundation. I want to just emphasize the importance of the work you all do, and we all do, and for institutionally related foundations. I'd like to just point out that this building, when Amazon left it, was vacant for a while, and then the state acquired it, and Frank Chop, the speaker, led that whole effort. But there were 3 leaders of what we had at the time a district foundation that played a key role in that team that actually made this happen. And one of the things that the foundation did was the state did appropriate some money to fix up the building after they acquired it, but not about a third of what was necessary to do it. And the remainder of those funds came from a new market tax credit, which was sponsored by the Seattle District Foundation, because it had to have a nonprofit sponsor. So the fact that there's 9 floors in this building and 9 allied health programs going on in this building, the kind of organizations that we're all part of made a huge difference here in what happened here. Since we all follow the news, I don't think I need to point out the challenges our colleges face in these times, both locally and nationally, and making the work of institutionally related foundations all the more critical. I think that the reason that this conference is important is that by working together, we can be more effective, we can learn from each other, and speak with a common voice. That's what this conference is all about. I'm very impressed with your agenda, and I think it's going to be a good day for you. So I'm not able to stay, but I will be here for the evening program. Looking forward to the evening program. And again, I just want to extend, on behalf of the foundation board, a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you.
Whoa, drop the mic. And I haven't had a reason to yet, but anyway. I'm looking around the room and I'm thinking that most of you are sitting with people you know, and that's great because we want you to enjoy each other's company with your teams. But we also want you to get to know each other a little bit better. So we're going to do an icebreaker, of course, which is a standard kind of thing. We hope you find it fun. You may be moving around a bit, so if you need to clear some space, please take time to do that. But I'm going to introduce a couple of my teammates here to help us get rolling and help us warm up. Whitney Keys, who is our Executive Director of Corporate and Foundation Relations, and Emma Lacalli, who is our Associate Director of Communications and Alumni Relations. Take it away.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Who was here last night at our Wine Academy? Show of hands. Oh, big turnout. Fantastic. Well, we appreciate you being here this morning. As Kerry said, we just want to get you warmed up a little bit because we've got a long day of activities today and tonight and then tomorrow morning. A quick question, though. Who came from the furthest part of Washington? Anyone out there? Walla Walla? All right, there you are. Well, we're glad you made the trek. And we're also curious, is there anyone here who's all alone, the only person from their department? Great, we're glad you're here too. So there's like 3 hands, and that's part of our icebreaker today is some of us have big teams like we do from Seattle, but other people are here all by themselves, and we don't have a lot of time to network because we're learning all this incredible information, so that's why we're going to do this exciting, interesting exercise with you. So Emma, take it away.
All right, can you hear me okay? Okay, so in front of you, you should have a pad of paper. You can find your pad of paper and a pen. We are going to prompt you to write down 3 things, and please do not write your name on this piece of paper. So we're just going to go one at a time. So the first thing we'd like you to write is please write down your role. Your title, your role. What do you do? That one's easy. Maybe just look back up at me when you're done. Okay. Good? I have a long title, so it takes a while. All right, the second thing we'd like you to write down, think back to your school days, K-12, college, grad school, whatever. What was your favorite subject? Favorite class, favorite subject? Don't write lunch.
Or recess.
Okay. Anyone need more time? Okay, third thing, this is always hard for me, so I'll give you a little extra time. What's one fun fact about yourself? Something you like to do, something interesting, funny story. Just write it in shorthand, doesn't need to be the whole description. Sorry, fun fact is tricky.
And this is an icebreaker, it's meant to be fun, so no stress. If you can't figure out what you liked in school, then just skip it. But write down a couple things on that piece of paper.
Okay. Everybody set? Okay. 10 more seconds. Don't think too hard.
Does everyone have at least 2 things written on their piece of paper? Yes, we're good. Okay, we're moving forward.
All right, so I'm sorry to say, but you are gonna need to stand up. Get out of your seat.
But bring your piece of paper with you.
Bring your paper, and we're gonna form a circle-ish shape.
Not the notepad. Tear off the piece of paper. Gonna lighten your load, so bring your piece of paper.
And maybe try to stand next to someone you don't know.
We're gonna form a big circle all around the perimeter of this room. Good job, everyone. Make your way to the edge of the room, looking good. Yes. All right.
So, we were expecting a little bit of snow today, but we didn't get any. So we thought maybe it's time to have a snowball fight. So here's the rules. When I say go, not yet, when I say go, we want you to crumple up your paper. Okay, go, yeah. And then, don't do this yet. We're going to ask you to so throw your paper across the room. And then your goal, you need to find a new snowball. And then you're trying to find the owner of that new snowball. So you do that by mingling, meeting people, learning what they do, learning about what they liked in school, and their fun facts. So we'll have about 10, 15 minutes. We want this to be a mingling activity, so please chat with one another. And then at the end, we'll hear about who you met.
Okay, one clarification. Just as Emma was saying, the goal is not like, hi, what's your title? Oh, it's not you and I'm moving on. No, it's like we're still gonna have a conversation, get to know each other, but then we will move on and try to find the person with the paper. If you find your person and you have that piece of paper and they agree that it's theirs, then come find me or Emma, okay? All right, ready? Go, we're gonna count down.
1, 2, 3. Snowball.
Woo! Here we go. Okay, find your piece of Back to your tables, please. Excellent job. It looked like you were having fun. We heard some amazing stories, but you all didn't get to hear all these amazing stories. So we're going to do a little bit of sharing of that experience. I'm going to pass this over to Emma.
Who here thought the fun fact that you learned was super interesting? Who learned a really fun fact? Oh, a lot. Okay, I'm going to call on you, so if you're really shy and you don't want to talk in front of everyone, put your hand down. Okay, now put your hands back up if you want to share a fun fact that you learned.
20 years a gymnastic coach. So I want to see a backflip. Come on.
Who was that? Yeah.
Monique. Monique from Edmonds.
Thank you. Who else wants to share?
Everyone wants to meet this person. She wrote her senior thesis on sumo wrestling.
Where are you?
Who else has a fun, I'm going to go to this side of the room.
Search dog handler. Spend a lot of time in the woods. Oh yeah, Josh.
Who else? Couple more.
Oh yes. Nick taught himself to knit, bake, play piano, and read music. And it's just their survival skills, which is insane.
Let's do two more.
Sat back down and realized that Tom was my person. And he has been bitten by a vampire bat and completed a series of rabies shots, so that's good. Do you want to tell more?
Well, I was in general warfare school, so that's it. I am trying to find the executive director who is in their 29th residence.
Did anyone else need to put out an all call for a snowball who was not identified? Anyone? Unidentified snowballs? Interesting facts. Okay, well, thank you so much for participating in this early morning icebreaker. Great to learn a little bit about one another and excited for the rest of the conference.
Thanks, everybody.
Whitney and Emma, that was fabulous. And I know that you all want to keep throwing snowballs, but let's give them a hand. Thank you. You know, I gotta say, when they first said we want to do an icebreaker and then they proposed an idea that was exactly what we did at Moses Lake a few months ago, I said, oh guys, like we gotta freshen this up. And so they sent this idea and I thought, go for it. So I'm glad it worked. It was great observing you all. I heard squeals, I heard screams, I heard laughter, and people got really creative in grabbing the mic and doing an all call. So good for you. Well, I hope, and Tom and, yes, there you are, Paul. Okay, and Matt maybe? Anyway, we have a great interview session for you all, and we're gonna keep going with relationship building, and we're gonna talk about alumni relations. So I'm going to introduce to you Tom, who I think most of you know is the Executive Director of Edmonds since 2022. Tom brings more than 20 years of higher ed experience to his role, including Foundation CEO and Executive Director of Alumni Relations at Portland State University. He's also held senior advancement and alumni relations positions at 2 revered Chicago institutions, Northwestern and Loyola University School of Law. That's impressive. Joining Tom is a very, very dear friend and colleague, Paul Rucker, and Paul is one of us. Paul started out at Edmonds College and has been at Shoreline. Since then, he spent more than 20 years at University of Washington, and he has a long, big title. So, one that we can't fit on a name tag. But anyway, Paul is the Vice President for Alumni and Stakeholder Engagement, and he's the Executive Director of the UW Alumni Association. Please welcome Paul and Tom.
Thank you. Okay, so I need to ask, how many dogs are in the room?
Nice.
How many cougars are in the room?
My cougars, every one in my family went to Pullman with me.
Well, thanks so much for opening your minds, your hearts as we have this discussion. We're going to speak for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to open up for questions and answers, and we're going to also monitor questions that may be coming on through the Zoom link. So thanks again for doing this. So first, Paul, share with us anything that that wasn't shared about your background.
It all started at Edmonds College 35 years ago. Everything I learned there. And just a shout out to all of you and to the work that you do. My best years were at Edmonds Community College and at Shoreline Community College in those 15 years before coming to the university 20 years ago. And I'm a fan, I'm an advocate, I'm passionate about the innovation and the excellence that happens in our CTCs. We're going to talk a lot about alumni relations, we're going to talk a lot about advancement, and I hope that we can have some real candid questions around all of the wonderful opportunities and the pitfalls and challenges. I would say in all 35 years, the most exciting role that I had was with President Anamari Kause when she was appointed in 2015. She asked if I would expand my VP role and be her special assistant for community college engagement. And we set up a statewide effort with the Spokane colleges, the Seattle colleges, and a number of other UW alums that were college presidents to rebuild the transfer pathway to the University of Washington. For those of you that have been around for a while, the DTA, of course, went away years ago for the UW Seattle campus, and that pathway had become quite restricted with all of the selective admissions and all of the elite issues around the UW. The opportunities for transfer students became very complicated, and so I like to say over the last 10 years, the transfer pathway to the Seattle campus is one of the most active and vibrant pathways, and CTC students that enter the UW in that pathway graduate with a 4-year grad rate of 86%. 86%. High school admits 74%. So our students, our CTC students are crushing it at UW. One of the best roles I had.
This is great. I mean, here's an advocate of the work we do. Someone who went through the system, he understands it, he gets it. That's wonderful. Tell us a little bit about the Alumni Association, University of Washington, and the many things that's going on there. Give us the background.
So, the UW Alumni Association, like many of our large public university peers, 140 years strong, is an enormous community of passionate, dynamic, supportive Huskies. If I had the opportunity to be in your seat and having a conversation, should we start an Alumni Association today? There's a cliche from a John Fowles novel where he was describing this romantic relationship that the protagonist had. He said it's a lot easier to get into these relationships than it is to get out of them. 140 years later, I am burdened with the extraordinary inertia and the expectations and the forward momentum of what an alumni community expects of a large university. If I could go back and start it again, if I was having conversations like all of you are having, I would be very cautious about the formative decisions around purpose, outcomes, passion, and management. We have a great alumni community. The University of Washington, we all know it's an extraordinary public institution. Whether you went to the UW or not, we're all beneficiaries. But the alumni community and how we think about the relationship to alums and the expectations of public universities and what we are obligated to do in that space, my thinking's changed over all these years. And I hope we can get into those questions and topics more deeply.
Okay, so going along those lines, what does engagement mean to you?
You know, I think sometimes we can get so voraciously attracted to the frontline philanthropy and the development productivity in our shops. We have boards, we have college presidents, we have faculty that have significant philanthropic productivity needs from our organizations. I would encourage all of us to think more comprehensively about what our work is. At the UW, we have a 5-pointed star that describes our advancement, operation, and our priorities. And at the center of that star, we have 3 goals: relationships, reputation, and resources. Relationships, reputation, and resources. When I think about engagement, engagement hits all 3 of those priorities. Engagement can be philanthropy. Engagement can be legislative advocacy, where your alums are down in Olympia lobbying for higher ed funding. Engagement can be career services, student to student, student to alums. Engagement can be bringing your faculty into a relationship where public scholarship and community engagement brings more people to your campus to understand the vision and impact of what your colleges do. So I have a very broad definition of what engagement is, and I think so often we slip into a very convenient paradigm where all we do is pipeline development for major gift philanthropy. I would encourage us to be more expansive, more comprehensive, more enlightened in how we define what the role of public colleges are. If you're a private university, you're a corporation. When you're a public university, you're fulfilling the social contract made long, long ago. So I have a very broad and sweeping definition of engagement. Of course, the devil's in the details. How do you organize resources and staffing and metrics and outcomes? But I would encourage us all just to think a little more broadly about what it means to generate human capital, not just financial capital.
So tell me going a little deeper, engagement and Alumni Association is not just about alumni. Can you talk about that a little bit?
The University of Washington has, at any given time, 125,000 individual donors per year. We often will say now, when we look at the data, that more than half of the contributors to the University of Washington are non-alumni. More than half of our donors are non-alumni. I remember being in a Regents meeting probably 15 years ago when we were rolling out these data, and one of the Regents said, "Do we have a non-alumni association, Paul?" And I remember Cole, I was sitting in the audience and I thought, wow, what an interesting dilemma we have. The supporters and advocates and champions of our institution are not just our graduates, and I think particularly in our colleges, in the CTCs, the impact that you have on your local economies, on small businesses, on social mobility, on URM, underrepresented student access. Those who are champions and advocates of those values are not just your graduates. So when we think about should we start an alumni association, I'm all for starting an engagement enterprise. I'm more cautious about narrowing it only to graduates.
So here's something that's an elephant in the room. Sometimes when I think about diversity, I think about staffing and so forth. When I was first hired by Northwestern, I was sitting in this one room. This is 1999, and a comment was made about Latino people. They're like, well, Latino people don't really give money to colleges. And I remember this is 1999, and I shrank a little bit in the room, and I'm not sure why I shrank. I was the only person of color in this room. And in 2005, another comment was made again, and I remember I just shrank a little bit when they were like, African Americans don't like giving. And what we saw in the research, at that point I remember I said, I don't think that's true. We saw in the research that both groups give, but they give towards more of their community or churches and so forth. So we have to get that information out. I was in a meeting with Paul a while ago, and if you don't mind sharing what you saw in terms of like some of the outreach efforts you were doing with different groups of people. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So when we think about our institutions, we think about public schools and public universities, I oftentimes think of this dynamic tension around the history that universities have, and I would say that is not the history that CTCs have, but the history that universities like Washington has. They were not designed, they were not built, and they were not founded on the premise that all are welcome. Community colleges, technical colleges, your schools have a very different origin story, one that you should be very proud of. At the University of Washington, I'm firmly convinced that we have the capacity, the skills, the knowledge to create great change in issues of equity and access, and yet we have a history of exclusion. 140 years later, our Alumni Relations program, when you looked 20 years ago, what were the events and programs and communications? Who was at the table? Who wasn't at the table? When did we really start living up to that promise? I would say it's a continuing evolution. And when you begin having conversations like that, it can be very sobering and very uncomfortable. Your campuses were founded on a very different premise around access and opportunity. I'd like to think that you're able to move faster than we have in this space. We took some hard looks at ourselves and asked questions about who are we here to serve and for what reason, relevance, inclusion, opportunity, at a time where you could turn on the TV now and be very, very depressed about what's happening, and I am personally. Professionally, I'm very inspired by the work that all of you do, by the work that universities like UW does. I'm inspired that the values of access, inclusion, social mobility, economic opportunity, these are timeless values. These are the values that built your institutions. These are values that we've had to bring into the UW. But I just feel strongly that if we're really going to be authentic and purposeful, if we're going to live our public mission, if we're going to fulfill the social contract, the types of alumni, the types of constituent engagement programs have to look different, have to be framed by communities with the community. And that's a tall order. It is very convenient for us to talk about work that other people need to do in this space. It's much more complicated to bring that work into your foundations, into your boards, into your resource allocation decisions, into your engagement practices. This is our continuing work.
Along those same lines, so I know I look young, but I'm going to be 60 soon. Yes.
60 years old, I would not have had that. Tom Bull. That's great.
I know. What I'm getting at is that
Tom Bull, we met 20 years ago?
20 years ago.
That's fantastic.
Yes. And I've been in this field for 30 years, and I've never supervised a person of color. I want you to think about that for a second. I've never supervised a person of color. Well, Ciela, okay. Ciela.
We see you, Ciela.
That's right. I take that back. The first person of color supervised. But also in my life, I've never been supervised by a person of color. Now, Dr. Singh does consider himself a person of color. But looking at that, thinking about that, I do realize it's been much more challenging for people of color to get into this field. And once they get in, what I find out that they end up leaving quickly. Questions have come up to me as how come you didn't leave, what happened to you, and so forth. And I really don't know. The facts are someone will say to me, well, you're not like those other people. You talk a certain way. Still, conversations like that still comes up. And so, Paul, with that in mind, what are you doing? What would you recommend as these areas are growing? As we're building alumni associations, or we want to engage more alumni or community members, what would you recommend? What have you seen? What has changed in that area of staffing?
There's a lot there. I would say imperfection, evolution, a continuing professional maturity around what these programs mean. The University of Washington, in our engagement teams, we have probably 50 to 75 full-time staff. We have a governing board of the Alumni Association that is 70% non-white. That's not a new reality. That was a demographic that has been consistent probably for the last 20 years. Despite all of the declarative and performative statements of inclusion. This is work that is unfinished and evolving and imperfect. At the UW, in my organization, on my leadership team, even though I think the data would say that the staff of the Alumni Association are probably the most diverse within advancement, the University of Washington's advancement team is an enormous size, and I'll use a number, not because I think that that's a good thing, but because it's just a reality of what happens after 50 years of compounding growth. We've got 750 people in advancement. And I heard that, but I want you to know, we are no more innovative, we are no more efficient, we are no more impactful than the 13-person team I had at Shoreline in 1998. People think that these large organizations are exciting and wonderful and they want to be there. After 35 years, I can tell you they are very complicated. And yes, extraordinary things happen at schools like ours, and extraordinary things happen at your schools. So when you ask, what are we doing to diversify the workforce? Are people feeling a sense of belonging? Are they feeling seen and valued in our organization? My response would be, perhaps. And I hope we're improving. I put it into the same category as our students. Are we able to create a sense of belonging and connection and a sense of worth and value for all of our team members? I think that continues to evolve at the UW. One of our colleagues, Thaisa from Shoreline, made a comment when I was here having coffee. She said she went to her first CASE conference a couple months ago, or maybe it was just last month, for the CASE 8 conference. And she mentioned the name of a team member who's on the advancement team that welcomed her at the newcomer session, created a connection. She remembered her name, and I knew the staff member, woman of color, longtime colleague of mine. And I would say that, to your question, how do we do that work? That's how we do it. Hand to hand, person to person, not performative, not what we're talking about from the stage, but what happens when no one's looking. So for you to mention that person's name and how she made you feel, I would say we need to do that at scale in all of our organizations and all of our communities, and that should be what we're doing with our students. That should be what we're doing with our middle school and high school outreach programs. That's what we should be doing with our community. That these are colleges that are here to serve them, not us.
Okay, how do you define alumni at your organization?
If you've walked across the University of Washington campus, welcome to the alumni community. There's a lot of debate around this. I remember early in my career, Michigan had a very prescriptive, you had to take so many units, you had to have this kind of a relationship. That is not the history of the University of Washington. There was a commercial in the 1970s that ran on a public service announcement here in Seattle, and it was a faculty member rowing a kayak across the Portage Bay, and it had one line that said, the University of Washington, you get something whether you went there or not. You get something from it whether you went there or not. We have a very liberal definition of alumni. If you were at the UW, if you were enrolled in a class, you are part of our alumni community. We have extended that to all of our continuing and professional education programs. So our total universe of graduates or alums, matriculated graduates, the traditional numbers that we would think of, 600,000 plus, we have another 500,000 former students that took degree, certificate, or non-matriculated programs. We don't get hung up on who's an alum and who's not. If you care about higher education, if you feel connected or want to have a connection to the UW, we want to serve you. But Tom, you're making a bigger point. When we think about who is our target audience, the University of Washington, with 2 or 3 million people in our database, our target audience, graduate or non-graduate, if you are interested in supporting the transformational work of our university, we want to serve you. We are evolving in our ability to reorganize resources, communications, data, to recognize that the traditional alumni audience is a convenient fallback. We need more than our graduates to ensure the future success of all of our advancement priorities.
And that explains your advocacy program. You guys have a pretty powerful one. Can you talk about your advocacy program?
2008, 2009, legislature was cutting higher ed. We all experienced, the community colleges too, about a 50% decline in public investment in the higher ed sector. We are not, collectively, the CTCs and the baccalaureate schools, we are not constitutionally mandated for funding in the state of Washington. So we are all in the discretionary side of the Olympia budget. 2008, 2009, significant reductions to higher education. I was new in my role, and the president of the university calls me down to the residence. I use those words specifically, calls me down to the residence. And I remember driving to Madison Park with a level of anxiety that you could imagine. I'd come out of Shoreline Community College. I'd been in a director level role at the U for 4 or 5 years. I was appointed into the executive director position. Get the call, I'm driving down to Madison Park in my Subaru. I'm all nervous. He sits me down and he says, Paul, we're losing millions of dollars a year in funding from Olympia. If our alums are not willing to stand up and advocate for supporting the UW, who would? In the Big Ten, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, they have these long-standing alumni advocacy programs. Why don't we have one in Washington? And he wasn't asking me why, he was telling me I want you to go build one. And there were complications around ethics and public employees and grassroots lobbying that we had to work through. But at the end of the day, in 2010, we launched a program called UW Impact. I encourage you to go online, uwimpact.org. And we set up a statewide alumni advocacy network within the nonprofit, so it has to be separate from public employees. And over these 15 years, that advocacy network has been one of the most powerful tools in lobbying the legislature, working with our university and working with other baccalaureates and working with the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges to restore funding for the higher ed sector. So when we think about our foundations, if you're a 501c3, you have a vehicle to connect to a grassroots lobbying opportunity. That is another way that your graduates and our community supporters can influence the center of that star, resources. We often think that private philanthropy is the most significant resource. It is significant, but I can assure you that the collective advocacy work that happened in 2019 with the Workforce Education Investment Act that the State Board, your colleges, the University of Washington partnered on, that created a dedicated funding stream that's brought tens of millions of dollars to all of our campuses. So there are really exciting ways, when you think about alumni engagement, you think about constituent engagement, that we can move the needle if we stay together.
I brought that up for a reason, because the advocacy program involves parents, faculty, staff, friends. It doesn't just have to be about alumni. And also, as you think about your own building of Alumni Association, people tend to think, oh, it's going to be about events and bringing people back. It doesn't have to be that. It could be simply alumni engagement or advocacy program. The next reason why I bring this up, because there's always this back and forth about how do you tie your mission, the Alumni Association, whatever you call it, to your college. And that's a great example of one right now. Again, it doesn't have to be an alumni association. Talk a little bit, going back to giving, alumni versus giving. There's always this pull. Talk a little bit about that, what you've experienced.
Are we interested in participation, or are we interested in giving? Are we measuring our success by the percentage of alums who give to our institutions? Is that the outcome that we seek? Or are we measuring our success by the number of alums and community members that are actively engaged in all of the different ways that we create value? These questions and that dynamic tension, that has been such a big part of our conversation and advancement for decades. I am so tired of the focus on alumni giving percentages. I steer the University of Washington away from that conversation. When you have an increasing number of graduates, when you're willing to define what a graduate is in the most expansive way, and then conversely hold yourself accountable for increasing the percentage of how many of those people give, I think we're going to be swimming upstream. I'd rather reframe the conversation and talk about the impact of constituent engagement, philanthropy being a very important component, career networking, important component, legislative advocacy, public scholarship, community engagement. There are many different ways we think about the value proposition of our work and engagement. When it comes to alumni giving, We just hired a new executive director of annual giving last month in Washington. We're rebuilding the whole annual giving program. I'm going to share some inside laundry here. Some TikTok influencer got a call last year from our student callers, and it was one of our wonderful student callers doing their scripted conversation. We've all received the phone calls, and the script, of course, started at a certain dollar amount, and then it gets reduced, and this TikTok influencer was taking the call and went out on TikTok afterwards and did this monologue and had like 1.5 million viewers, where he just skewered the University of Washington, invoked the Alumni Association. We're not even frontline fundraisers in annual giving, so I love that. And this went all the way through the leadership team, and we're watching this humiliating soliloquy about how tone deaf the UW was. Don't they understand? I went to school in COVID, I'm in debt, and you're asking me for money as the first request or the first interaction. We need to be responsible custodians and stewards of this audience. My feedback to our new annual giving director is the first call we should make to new graduates is, how are you and what can we do to support you? What programs and services can we connect you to that help you be successful at this stage of your life? I think the arrogance of our field to think that the first conversation we're going to have with our audience is, what can you do for us, is just so misplaced. But it has become so much a part of our culture in advancement. The University of Washington raises $700 million a year. That might sound like a great big number. I can't even understand the size of that number. But what I do understand is when I talk to new graduates and they say they're $15,000 or $20,000 in debt, they're uncertain about their job, how they're going to afford a house, I feel obligated to engage them in a way that honors their station in life and recognizes that we need to call these people closer to us and not put them in a place of denying our request.
How are we doing on time? Okay. So several years ago, this is way before the pandemic, we were looking at doing research on alumni associations. What we found out is that young people didn't like the term the association because it was old school, it meant clubs and structure. UCLA led the effort and they dropped for a while the association, so it was UCLA Alumni. Now recently I've noticed that they put the title back on UCLA Alumni Association. Along those lines of thinking about structure that engages younger, newer grads. And yet these schools are seen as old structure. Can you talk a little bit about that and changes you might be looking at making?
We're getting ready to drop association, so I'm going to go look and see what UCLA is doing. Who wants to join a club where the perception is that it's a bunch of 60-plus-year-old white guys? I mean, I think we need to be real about what we're inviting the next generation to be part of. I'm less sensitive about the association. We've de-emphasized the association in our external branding and messaging. It's more the alumni community or Washington alum or a number of kind of mock-ups that we have around the brand. I'm not going to bring association forward. We're completing a brand refresh right now, and we're going to introduce a new logo lockup, and it does drop association, so I'm curious about why UCLA is bringing it back. I think the question about dues paying membership in an association, we still have one. I have some sensitivities about how effective it is. I think there's an opportunity when we look at the data, particularly with our millennials, around cause-based engagement. And I think if we're moving the association kind of to a different level of visibility, but we're elevating impact, cause, and creating a bridge to what people are passionate about, I think the nomenclature is secondary, but I am de-emphasizing the association vernacular.
That is fantastic. Again, it was research that was done before pandemic, and a lot of schools decided they're going to, even at Portland State, we decided we're not going to emphasize anymore the association because we got a lot of pushback on it and so forth. So to hear that is amazing. UCLA, I don't know if they actually went back. I just know their branding, their association name is back on there. So that's why I brought that. And I don't know why. I thought they were one of the leaders that was moving forward.
I think they are one of the leaders.
Yeah.
UCLA is a great benchmark for us. I look at their work as an aspirational peer.
And we do have an alum, UCLA, right? Yeah, okay. So speaking of that I want to ask, I want to see how many of you, if you're a graduate, high school, you're involved, or even college, whatever, how many of you are actually involved with your Alumni Association? Can I see a hand raise? Yes. How many are involved just in your university? Maybe you're serving as doing mock interviews, or you're doing career stuff. And how many are involved with their college and the university? To me, that's...
How about one more question?
Yeah.
For those Huskies that raised their hand earlier, how many of you even knew there was an Alumni Association in Washington? Are any of you members of the Alumni Association? Very interesting. Lifetime member, thank you. Appreciate that.
It's interesting to me that for a lot of us, and for a lot of people in our field, they're involved in their Alumni Association working at it, but they're not involved as a grad in their Alumni Association. I think that's really odd to me because they're not getting the experience, what they should be getting, you know, to understand what it is to actually manage an Alumni Association or Alumni Engagement program. And so, cool. There's a question already. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I don't know, it's just interesting you just made me think about this. It's just a comment. I graduated from UW in the 90s. I joined the Alumni Association this year with my daughter's housing.
I think that is such a great example of the parent-family relationship that is part of our engagement community. We are much more active with parents at UW than we ever were. Started a parent program, strong partnership between my office and the parent program. We do a lot of work together, so thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
I did UW as a parent than I did as a mom.
I got to share with you all at Northwestern, we purposely reached out to the parents exactly for that reason, is that we saw the parents have the influence on their kids. And once the parents accepted it, their kids accepted it. So it sounds really terrible that we did it that way, but it worked. So we still have a lot of time, right? Okay, great. Yeah, we'll open the questions. Let's open up the questions.
What's on your mind? Tell us where you're from, just want to know.
Yeah, I'm Amber.
So, can I interrupt just to say, we
Yes.
need to make sure that folks who ask questions are on the mic, so that
Oh,
the 15
I can-
folks who are joining online.
Yes, great, thank you.
Amber from South Puget Sound. We have a really small shop in our foundation, like many of us here, and there's a constant debate with our board and the college side on whether alumni should be in public relations or outreach, or should it be in the foundation. We've tried an alumni association and it just hasn't gained traction. So curious any strategies, or if you've seen an example of it being on the college side versus the foundation, because if we're here to raise money, and engagement, sure, there's great alumni stories, but it feels like at the end of the day, we have to hit our budget requirement. And so that the time, you know, what's a good use of that time with alumni if they're not donating?
Amber, great question. A lot of respect for Tim Stokes, longtime leader in the system. I think it can work in any arrangement. I've seen it over in public affairs, I've seen it in external relations, and I've seen it in the philanthropic programs. If the singular purpose of the foundation is private philanthropy, and if that is the stated mission and measurable outcome and the only focus the foundation has, then by all means, put the alumni or engagement programs in a part of campus that has that priority and those outcomes as a focus. All of these years later, I'm sensitive to foundations being so limited in their definition of purpose. And I think we need to be cautious when we do segment those, because we all know that pipeline and evolution and donor stewardship, we don't need to be a rocket scientist to know if you're more engaged, more aware, more connected, you're going to be a higher level donor. So I think it's really a conversation for foundation boards to look in the mirror and say, are they here to raise money, or are they here to advance the comprehensive mission of the university? If it's the latter, then I think there's a place for engagement. If it's the former, then you're, in my opinion, provocative, you're in a short-term game environment. So I would recommend then having it over in an environment that supports the commitment to the social contract.
I want to add to one thing, and I put together a white paper on it, and I'll share with everyone. And there is a set of reflection questions that I think is going to help you make some decisions about what you want to do and how you want to start this paper. But I think a lot of people haven't thought about those reflections, thinking about why we're doing what we're doing. It's just like, we're going to do it because we want to raise money. If that's what you want to do, then it's great. But realize that if you put the term Alumni Association, I think there are going to be other expectations of you and so forth. The other thing I've seen with some of our groups, they will have join the Alumni Association. You click in, you pay some money, and there's nothing going on. I think you are setting up another expectation for people that they're going to have something that they want to see. You're not doing anything, you're just doing it to raise money. So I think these reflection questions are going to really help you figure some things out.
Great question, Amber.
Hello, Rachel from Wenatchee. Just a quick comment for colleagues. We call ours the Alumni Network. Changed it back in 2017 because it's also free. Question also, talking about advocacy and leveraging our alumni community supporters when it comes to things like legislature and budgets. I know we're used to having the state board do that for us. Do any of you have something like UW where you're sharing how to advocate for your specific community college or even at a state level? Okay.
Can I pick up on that? The state board has a very active legislative program, of course. Arlen Harris is a longtime leader of that program. Shout out to Arlen.
Go, Kerry.
This would be an example of where the UW and our government relations team would have worked very closely with Arlen and his team. So I think it really recognizes that if you're going to engage alums or community members in legislative advocacy, you can't have them running off rogue. There needs to be a disciplined, intentional, coordinated strategy that complements what Arlen or complements what your respective government relations team members would be doing. So I just think, again, stronger together, coordination, intention, but not abdication. And I think this is where our donors, our champions, our supporters, our alums, these are all assets in a portfolio of opportunity.
Yeah, I was just going to, Josh Gersman, Highline College, many years at Green River. I remember when you were at Shoreline and a lot of your great presentations back then. Adding on to Rachel's question, at Green River, the President Rakowski used to have an advocacy network that was community leaders and alumni together that would meet on a regular basis to be able to reinforce those messaging during the session. I think that for us, it's always a matter of scaling up, right? So we have an alumni community at Highline College. We have a series of events throughout the year. We have our Black and Brown Male Summit, our Yale Summit for young ladies. We have alumni that come back and present at those for incoming and current students. We have our Highline Legends Network that Sharon is leading with our retirees and friends that we're trying to bring alumni into. We've heard comments from people like, we don't want to go sit with those old people, so we have to figure out how to project that this isn't an old people's game, that this is your college, your story. And so I think that over the years we've whether it was at Green River or Highline or we have this conversation frequently. It's how do we not try to shoot for the moon so quickly to have the 4 million member network, but to say it's okay to have a couple hundred people that are involved and engaged doing something, as long as it's something that other people want to join and be part of, and then that we can make it sustainable.
I completely agree. I am not captivated by growth. I'm not motivated by an event has to be bigger than it was last year. I have sensitivity about falling into an event paradigm, so that's another conversation about the sensitivity of events. But the programs that you described at Highline, those are all the programs that we built in support of the UW. I think that these engagement initiatives, retirees, former students, community advisory groups, to me, this is the core of our educational mission. I don't see those as discretionary or nice to haves. I see those as the other side of the student affairs coin. It's the alumni community affairs educational programming. And I think my early career at Edmonds, I came in as an adjunct faculty member and a student advisor. And when I moved into Alumni Relations at Washington all those years later, I didn't feel like it was any different. I could have gone and worked in student affairs at UW and been just as passionate and just as excited. So I see advancement as foundational to the educational mission, not this auxiliary that's discretionary. So when you describe retirees and all of those different audiences, those are all the programs I have, and there's certain natural sizes to their engagement. Now, I don't want the programs to be stale. I don't want them to be declining. They need to be relevant. They need to be purposeful. I think that technology allows us to personalize our outreach. Our data analysis allows us to know more about what people care about. So we're moving from an analog environment to a digital environment. You may be further along than the big University of Washington. Bigger isn't better. You may know more about your audiences because they're smaller than ours. So I just think that being pragmatic and thoughtful about the why, and then being systematic about sustainable program design. If you start introducing programs and then calling them back, or your example of pay some dues and then there's nothing behind a membership, you're going to hurt your brand on that. So I think be rational in your program development, but have it connected to the core mission of the university, so it's not a variable program that some new administrator can come in and take out.
I'm going to add one thing, Paul, and I want you to address this, and I think I'm assuming that because I've been through this, regardless of our mission, what we're doing, the facts are every president I work for, they want to see numbers. They look at the room and they're like, where are the numbers? Where are the numbers, right? And so I don't know if anyone has experienced that, but how do you address that, Paul?
President Anamari Kause, 10-year run, she retires in June, has a very cliche phrase that you probably have heard if you've ever seen her speak in public. She says, the University of Washington's success will not be measured by its rankings. It will be measured by its impact. I think that the measurable outcome framework and the definition of success, where we're only using one data point, is the least sophisticated decision we can make, but it is the most popular. I think we have an obligation to do more, to be more, and to see more in our work than just what someone gives. Now, I'm not immune to the impact of philanthropy. University of Washington, $700 million a year in private philanthropy. I'm as excited about the $70 million that retirees gave to the last campaign as I am about Bill Gates' $75 million single gift. We have to reframe how we're defining our roles and our purpose. That can be awkward when you have a new president come to your college, and the average lifespan of a new president is, what, 3 to 6 years? They're going to come in and they're going to say, I need more, I need more. I think this is where our foundation boards, our community leaders, all of this in the room, we're not passing through for these roles, or at least I hope we're not. We need to build community. Stephen Hill and I used to serve on panels like 25 years ago. I think it's awesome that he's still connected. Kerry, well done. That is awesome. The equity and relationships and stakeholder value that we create is marvelous. We need to go deeper and be more enduring in how we define what our work is.
So do we have any questions online?
Not yet.
Other questions? Comments? Frustrations?
I like the frustrations. What are we frustrated about?
Okay, Paul.
Yes.
You dropped the word events.
Yes.
And I know we're talking about alumni, but I think I have heard rumblings among some of the group along the way throughout the year about events. So talk about events.
We all love events. So you know what I think is so marvelous is events have really become kind of this trigger word for something that we should be avoiding. We do a lot of events at the University of Washington, no doubt about it. And I would say in the same breath that events can be the least sophisticated expression of our work. An event in my environment, if we're going to do an event and stand up an event and bring a group like this together, we often talk about like a golf swing, and I'm not a golfer, but apparently there's something in the golf swing about the follow through. Maybe those of you that golf know what that means. We should be putting as much time after the event as we did preparing and executing the event. And I bet if I asked for a show of hands of how many do that, myself included, very few of us. It is super hard to engage a strategy where we've gathered all of you in the room and we have a post-event communications, post-event engagement strategy, post-event measurement outcome strategy. If this were an event at the UW, and if we were doing what I would want us to do, We should have a follow-up message. We should have 3 other ways you can get involved. We should be able to track whether or not you attended another event. We should be able to incorporate your participation in our database to know, are you more likely to attend a certain type of event based on what we may know about what you did in this event. Do we do that at UW? Sometimes. Not always. Maybe not even often, but that would be an area of growth for us. So I'm not anti-event. I'm an extrovert, and Tom knows this. I come into rooms like this, just like when I was at Ravenna Elementary School in 1975 with my new tough skins on, and I saw all those new students in September, and I was so excited because everybody was so excited. You're back in school. I have not lost that excitement when you walk into an event and you see alums and friends and donors. I'm more excited when I walk into a UW event and I don't know anybody. I'm more excited when that happens, because then that tells me that our systems are attracting audiences that are not the usual suspects. We need to be strategic, we need to be thoughtful, we need to have follow through, but when we're at an event, and this is something I feel really strongly about, we're not tourists, we're not observers, we're not here watching the event. We need to be in and immersed and engaging in that event. So I think event philosophies and event strategies, we talk about them on one level. I think we need to pull that down to a level of strategy and depth that's far deeper than just, can we get people in the room? PSA for the next president's meeting. Next question though, let's talk about what frustrations, what's worrying you? Right. Microphone coming your way.
Am I on now? Hi, Kristen from Everett Community College. I was just curious about, we have slightly less than 750 on staff, so a little bit less than you. Just curious, if you had to advocate for more staff, if you have a very tiny team, what would be something that you would really try to talk about or discuss in order to advocate for more staff to be able to do more impact?
Everett Community College, one of the great long-standing institutions in our system. A shout out to diversity. You have a new trustee appointed 2 weeks ago, Joe Davis, African American, Snohomish County deputy and federal agent, is the past president of my alumni board, and he's under 40. Under 40, black male, law enforcement officer, dedicated public service, new trustee. That's awesome. Way to go. What would I advocate for in terms of staff if I had a small shop? I would ensure that the university president and the board of trustees and my foundation board had a shared definition of this comprehensive engagement, comprehensive advancement environment, reputations, resources, and relationships. I would ensure that we establish that clarity, and that from that clarity, I would distribute resources. I am not caught up in, we have to have a dedicated alumni relations person. I'm the classic utility player. Frontline fundraiser, events professional, communicator, administrative hack. I think that the magic of our roles is we have to be able to play all these positions. I think it's hard when you make a request, Christian, for a dedicated alumni relations team when you have a 3 or 4 or 5 person shop. I think what you do is you have it be a stewardship person that also has alumni relations and also has events. I think you've got to demonstrate that you're going to get multiple outcomes from one position. Is that ideal year after year? No, you're going to get spread thin, but I'd rather have a shared utility position than no position at all. Kerry, do we have more time?
Yes.
Kerry Shaw, Renton Technical College. You mentioned career advancement as a value add for alumni. Can you share an example of what that practically looked like for your alumni in terms of career advancement?
So career services, career engagement, career networking, that whole kind of suite of services. This is where low-cost technology has been a game changer for big programs like ours and available to all of you as well. In the early part of my career in alumni relations, we had to do the networking lunches. We had to bring people together, again, to the events challenges. There are now software programs that are reasonably priced that allow for the active matching of students to students and students to alums. At UW, we have a program called Huskies at Work. 1-day job shadowing, students to alums, or students to students. You can set the system up any way you want. We will have several thousand people a year on the alum side and on the student side doing these paired matchings. You fill out a profile in the student side, you fill out a profile on the alumni side, the system does matching. My Alumni Relations team has not a heavy touch, but a light touch in terms of workload management. But then there's this kind of self-management where in the spring and in the fall, hundreds of students will be out with these alums. They take photographs, they send it in to us, they have 1-day career contacts, they go out and spend a day in someone's job, and we hear from our alums, many of whom are donors, that that's some of the most enriching, purposeful work they do. We hear from our students, oh my God, I had this incredible experience going to XYZ company. I think your colleges have more opportunities for success because your relationships with your local businesses are personal, because they're in all of your committees. That would be an example that is accessible, it's measurable, it's impactful, and it doesn't bury your team. Huskies at Work.
Just going to add to that, you don't have to build it yourself. Partner with career services. It's something I've done in large organizations. I've partnered with student affairs, career services, athletics. They already have programs in place. It is just a partnership, so don't feel you have to take it on. They're the expert in the field as well. As a large organization, you probably have it within your organization. And a large organization, so that we butt again, we partner with the experts. So I just want to throw that advice out there. Great question.
It is. You can come see me afterwards and I can catch you on that. She asked what was the software product, and there's a couple different tools that we use, and I can send them over. Other thoughts, other worries or reflections do we have? Are we past the feeling that bigger is better? Did I get that message across? Bigger's not better. Bigger's just more layers, more complication. Bigger is not more innovative, and it's not more impactful. Other questions? Right in the back.
Lisa Smith with Grace Harbor College. I just want to say thank you for what you said about bigger is not better, because I'm a staff of 2. We've been a staff of 2 for 8 years, and we have to be that utilitarian player out on the field. And I'm the marketing person, I'm the CFO, I'm the attorney, I'm all those things, right? And it's a large skill set. And one of the things I always tell myself is, you know, my vision is to be the premier philanthropy in our organization in our rural community. And, you know, I want to be like the UW one day, and be like the UW Foundation. But the reality is that we don't have the same resources as you. And my goal is in my small shop is that we always work towards excellence with whatever time, resources, people, money that we have available to us, because I don't have what you have. But you sitting here and also telling me like bigger's not better, and realizing, yeah, bigger organizations, there's more bureaucracy, there's more hoops and things to manage and challenges that you face. So kind of like being a small shop right now. So I just want to say thank you for that. It's really
I am so glad to hear that. I think that is awesome. I'm going to riff on that a bit. My 15 years at Shoreline and Edmonds, I would say those roles, 85 or 90% of my time was on target. Impact, engagement. I never doubted that my time and effort and limited resources was directly impacting the need. Vice President of the University of Washington, hundreds and hundreds of employees, less than 10% of my time was on target. I'm in the last few years of my career, and it has been a phenomenal run. I love the University of Washington. I was unable to sleep a couple of weeks back, 2 months ago now, and I was online, and when they announced that David Baker won the Nobel Prize for his work in the protein design lab at UW, and he's a Garfield High kid that spent all 30 years at the University of Washington, I had this wave of pride for our state, for our community, and for the creation of knowledge. And I realized that that is very far away from me at the UW. When I was at Edmonds and Shoreline, the impact that I was able to have, what you do at Grace Harbor County, I remember working with Jim Minkler when he was at the Spokane colleges before he went to Grace Harbor. Your ability to personally touch the transformation, to personally impact it, and to create the efficiency where the majority of your effort actually goes to the need, not goes to supporting the bureaucracy that eventually gets to the need. It's really hard to see that when you're underwater in your budget or you're feeling overwhelmed because you don't have enough staff. That there's a counter narrative where you're sitting in my seat and you look at the layers and layers and layers of bullshit that goes on before you're able to do that amazing work. And I love the UW, and I will be the first person to champion it, but bigger isn't better. So relish the opportunity to have that proximity to transformation that is more elusive in larger shops. We're going to do something big, and this is what the UW is able to do. So I've long felt that with 65,000 students, with 125,000 donors and 600,000 graduates, I never, as a student at the UW, I never felt personally connected. I never had a transformational student experience. I never had the experience that Joe Davis had when he was at Pierce College, before he went into the military, before he came as a transfer student to UW-Tacoma, before he rose up in the Alumni Association board and now as a trustee at Everett. We're going to build a welcome center at the University of Washington. A comprehensive, integrated, new students and families, alumni, and community engagement, $62 million building, all privately supported in my division, adjacent to the Burke Museum on the N1 parking lot, right off of the light rail station. And we are going to live our promise to creating access and welcome and belonging to our community. We're going to finally get in front of that challenge of no one knows how to access the university. No one knows how to navigate the university. We're going to do this, and we're going to be open on the evenings. We're going to be open on the weekends. If you've been to the Gates Foundation's Discovery Center that has the exhibits that describe the impact, we're going to have that same type of design, 2 floors, conference rooms, open to our public, and we're going to get after living the public mission of the University of Washington. And it's taken 35 years to get that conversation to happen. So that's where I do feel a sense of joy, that our relationships, our reputation, we're going to name the facility the Anamari Kause Welcome Center after our amazing president, and we're going to do more of what you do every day.
So we're going to be closing unless there are any other questions, and Paul will do some reflections. But one thing I want to mention, this is amazing, right? The University of Washington building is this big building space. I'm looking at Galen also because you have an incredible space for what you do at land. What I'm getting at is that don't look at these other organizations and go, oh my God, we don't have it, and it depresses you. Like, we cannot do that, because that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to build something that fits your organization, your mission, and so forth, and that's what you can start thinking about. Use these organizations as a guide, maybe, to help you think, to reflect on it, but don't get down because you don't have what they have. That's not what we're here to do. And so I just want to really, really have you think about that, reflect on that more. What is important to you, your organization, but importantly, you have to start thinking about your leadership team as well, because one of the concerns I do have is when you want to start your own alumni, whatever it may be, is that what your leaders want? They've got to be part of this conversation. And even if the president is part of it, or a trustee, how are the deans feeling and everything else? You're going to need that support from them. So you have to consider all these people as well. Thank you all, but with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Paul to do some reflections and some final thoughts.
Tom, thank you. I was at Dan Evans' funeral a month or so ago on campus. 1964, Dan Evans, governor of the state of Washington, passes the landmark legislation, the Community College Act, here in the state of Washington, that created the funding for the modern system that we have today. Dan was, and his family continues to be, extraordinary Huskies, and I had the great privilege over all of these decades to spend a lot of time with Dan Evans. He came through our regents after he was governor. He was the chair of our foundation board. He took an active interest in alumni advocacy and engagement, and I had many conversations with him about his early vision for the community colleges. I consider myself a community college person before a university person. My identity and my passion started and rests with all of your campuses and all of your work. Dan talked about what he was thinking about in the 1960s and all the way through to where we are today. It is such a story of impact, innovation, excellence, and really it's a story of service, servant leadership, open access, social mobility, in an era of attack on DEI, in an era where we are overwhelmed by what's happening. The work that you have done and have always done is timeless and valued, and it will persist. And so just gratitude for recognizing that we may feel the pressure right now. I certainly do. I'm feeling overwhelmed by what I'm seeing going on, but then I'm also inspired by the anchors of our organizations that are not moved by what's happening now. So stay the course, hold the line, and know that the proximity to impact that you're experiencing is incredible, and I'm grateful for it.
Thank you so much, Tom and Paul, and what a conversation. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to reflect also on Paul's comments about Dan Evans, and also connected to the idea that, you know, bigger is not better. I am in the last stage of my career, and I was at University of Washington as well as WSU. That's where I started my philanthropy career. And I did the naming campaign for the Evans School. I loved being at University of Washington, but I have to say, as much as I love the institution and love the shine and the glow and all of the great things they're doing, I chose in my last chapter to come back full circle. I went to Highline. I ended up at a Josh Gerson. I ended up at the UW and then went off to a small private elite in Dallas, Texas, and went into broadcasting. So I have had a very circuitous route, but it was important to me in coming back to Washington State to do something that was on purpose and meaningful for me. So I just want to emphasize that what Paul is saying about really being in gratitude for where you are now, despite all the challenges, just read the headlines. As much as you think we're challenged at the community college level, and we are, there's no doubt about it, but the universities are up against criticism of their value proposition. You're looking at cuts, major cuts. Think of the federal funding that those institutions get and how they survive to a great degree on indirect cost recovery, right? In addition to the grants themselves. Yes, they have big endowments. The distributions from those $1 billion+ endowments are not going to save those institutions. They have less ability to be nimble than we do. So not to do an us versus them, but just reflect that everybody, no matter where they are in this field, is facing major challenges, and the work that we do is more important than ever. If we have felt unseen at our institutions, this is the moment for us to become partners, to stand up, to really show our value to our institutions. So thank you, Paul. Thank you. And thank you, Tom. Okay, so, you know, when we got feedback on the last round of conferences, we heard that you all wanted a few more breaks. So I don't know that we have more breaks, but we're going to make it a little bit longer. And so we're going to take a break until 11. What I'd ask you to do, because I've been prompted by my colleagues, is one, please take note of the hot topics board. And this we've kept from conference to conference. Yes, I've got my Vanna over here, Michael Beneke, our Director of Communications. If you have a hot topic, please put it up there. And we're going to try to address hot topics along the way. as well as sum up on Friday what it is that we want to carry forward in terms of conversations and discussions. But please take note of that. And also Mandy, Mandy, are you in the room? She might have stepped out. This is our event planner, Amanda Gregory, who you probably saw online. She has asked that if people could put their coats, I mean, if it's convenient for you, to hang them up. It'll make it easier for people to get around through the tables as we move around throughout the day. So not a requirement, just reminding everybody that there are coat racks in the back. So with that, take a break, talk to each other, have fun, and we'll be back at 11.